Welcome to the Alisa Childers podcast, where we equip Christians to identify the core beliefs of historic Christianity, discern its counterfeits, and proclaim the gospel with clarity, kindness, and truth. And we have a bit of an unusual episode today. It's something I've been talking about with my friend Phoenix Hayes for quite a while. We've been kind of planning on having this discussion that I think is really going to be helpful to the body of Christ. We're going to be talking about the whole issue of the body positivity movement. We're going to be talking about things like, what is fat shaming? Are we overcorrecting on some of these issues? What's the reality? What is the biblical view of the human body, and how we should be thinking through these things, as we are such an image-focused culture, right? And it's a pressure all of us feel when we're on YouTube or on a platform. So I'm really excited to bring you into this conversation. I do want to let you know that I haven't mentioned this in a while, but my new music that I did a whole episode about several weeks ago, a couple months ago, is finally out. It's available, and I'm so excited. So a couple of ways that you can, well, really there's only one way that you can own the music, that you can purchase it, and that's through alisachilders.com/music. You can order a physical copy that is signed, or you can just simply download the songs. They're available for download on that link as well. Again, that's alisachilders.com/music. Now, if you want to listen to the songs, they are now available via lyric videos on YouTube. So you can go to youtube.com/@AlisaChildersMusic. That's youtube.com/@AlisaChildersMusic. And you can listen to all 5 songs. The lyric videos are up. And I have personally just been so blessed by some of the comments that people have left under the songs that's really brought, it's ministered to them. It's been edifying to them. It's caused them to relate with maybe some of the struggles that I talk about in some of the songs. So I am just really excited about that. Now, the reason that it is exclusive to the website right now is because it is very expensive to make music. And so we are keeping it there so that we can try to make back some of the money that we invested in creating the music. But I also want to let you know that at that link, alisachilders.com/music, you can purchase the backing tracks. You can purchase stem tracks, which if you have a worship band that you want to perform one of the songs, you can, bring up the guitars, or you can bring up the strings, and you can do it in that way and mix it just like, anything else. And then also the band charts and the string arrangements are available on the website. And as I've said before, one thing that was really important to us is we do not require royalty reporting for churches. So you do not have to report that you have performed the song. That is yours to use in your services for free. I don't think it's right that people have to report when they sing a song, and then people get paid just because you sang a worship song. So royalty-free on that end, but if you'd like the backing tracks and things, those are available on the website. And yeah, really excited. So alisachilders.com/music. All right, with that said, I am excited to bring my friend Phoenix Hayes back on the podcast. She was on before. Phoenix, we talked about identity several months ago, and you're one of my favorites. I've told you this. I think, you guys got to bring her in to speak. She's a great presenter. She's a great apologist, one of my favorites. But this is sort of something that's related to identity. And I'm just going to kind of share with our audience what led to this conversation that we're having today, because you and I participated in a review of the Barbie movie. And this was on the Cross-Examined podcast. And it was you and me and Melissa Doherty and Hillary Ferrer. And was that it, or was there somebody else?
Natasha.
And Natasha. Of course, my girl, Natasha, was there, right. She didn't talk much because she hadn't seen the movie yet. So that's probably why I forgot.
I can't say anything.
I know.
So wise. Say something.
I know. That's what I was telling her. I'm like, I'm pretty sure you still have something to add, having not seen the movie. And she did. But we were basically analyzing the movie just from a biblical perspective, and it was a great conversation because there was some disagreement on some things, which is always fun.
I didn't expect that, and I loved it.
Yeah, that was kind of fun. But you made an observation that you sort of just kind of floated over because we didn't really have time to go deep into it. And so I want to just give you the opportunity to maybe share that observation, because I remember thinking when you said that, we need to talk more about that. So share a little bit about what led to that and what your observation in the Barbie movie was.
So the moment you're talking about is, so before we all got together, we sat down and we each tried to pull together some main points that we identified in the film. And it was a really fun exercise because we didn't do it together, and then we came together and I was like, "Oh, and you saw that. Well, I saw this." And that's what I think helped make such a rich podcast recording and discussion. But one of the themes that I kept picking up on was the Barbie movie's attempts to redefine reality over
Mm,
and over again. And there was several instances where it would describe what was happening as though that is reality. That is how the world works, when in fact it's not how the world works. It's how the movie makers want us to believe the world
mm,
works. And one such example that I just threw in there, and before I say it, I felt a shift in the room as I said it, because this is the thing we don't want to talk about a lot of the
mhm,
time, especially among women, especially um, among women who don't necessarily wrestle with this problem. It's a sense of, oh, I can't necessarily comment on that.
mm.
And we can think of lots of other cases where people feel that way about other things. So the point that I brought up about the movie was that, as we know, everyone, all the women in Barbie Land are Barbie, and all the men are Kens, and they're all treated equally, equally attractive, equally smart, equally well dressed. They just have different themes associated to them if they're, disco Barbie or nurse Barbie or whatever the case is. Well, there was obese brunette Barbie. And
I don't think
that
that's what they called her, but
that was I call it like it is.
yes, you
And
do.
growing up in a world where Barbie was what did they call her in the movie? The
I don't
classic
remember.
Barbie, or I can't remember her name. But tall, thin, blonde,
Oh,
busty.
yeah,
Um,
stereotypical Barbie. You're
there we
talking
go,
about the main
stereotypical
character, yeah,
Barbie. There we
yeah.
go. So growing up in the world where we all associate that with Barbie, and fine, we've thrown in diversity, and you can now get Barbie in every single shade of skin color. But I think you can even get Barbie in a wheelchair, maybe.
Yeah, they had a that was in the movie as well, yeah, and
That was in the
Pregnant
movie as
Barbie,
well.
which was the only one that they acted like that was weird, was that
Exactly.
Pregnant Barbie was like, "Ew, that's gross and weird," which was
That's gross
that's a
and weird.
whole other conversation.
Exactly. But the thing that I just kept thinking about is, okay, I'm noticing that the heavy set brunette Barbie, like, no one seems to notice that she is not the same as the other size 2 Barbies, and that doesn't appear to affect her ability to use her sexuality over men at all. They all just seem to find her equally attractive, as all the others, and even now as I'm talking, I just feel landmines that I'm
Mhm,
stepping over with every
mhm,
word that I'm saying. Um, but I
yeah,
feel like because I'm a heavy set brunette, I at least have the freedom to s speak what I think everyone else is honestly thinking, and I don't mind saying it.
mhm,
Um, and I just thought that is not reality.
yeah,
Now sure, there are men that have a thing for heavier women, but there's a reason why there's an idealized body size. It's not always healthy for sure. I'm not
right,
advocating that you need to be underweight and what Hollywood pushes on us, but I'm the first to say that no, that's not the same. And it's not, generally speaking, equally appealing, for the same reason that a woman wouldn't necessarily find a heavyset man equally appealing, all other things being equal. And I
mhm,
think there's a lot of reasons behind that, but just at a surface level, if you want to take God and religion out of it, just at a pure instinctive level, we tend to gravitate toward the most appealing mate, shall we say,
mhm,
the one that looks like they're going to produce the best offspring with us. Um, and of course, there's a whole bunch of other things to consider there. But that is what stood out to me is no, that's not reality. And that's
Hmm.
actually okay. It's okay that men don't think she's equally beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, I know you told me this is hard for you to talk about, and it's actually kind of a topic it's hard for me to talk about as well because I've experienced issues like this, but from a different angle. And I wrote about this in my book, Live Your Truth and Other Lies, how I had, for years, I struggled with bulimia. I struggled with an eating disorder. And it's something that was hard to write about, hard to talk about. But so growing up, I saw all these underweight models, everything when I was growing up, all of the clothing ads, magazines at the mall were these underweight models who also somehow had these massive breasts, that
Oh, yeah.
totally realistic there.
Heaven, heaven.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
just I share about this in my book that through even some experiences with gymnastics coaches and things like that, I got this idea that my body had to be different than it was, and so I would always kind of strive to be underweight. So I was personally really glad a few years ago when some of the major companies started letting up on that. There was a store in the mall aimed at young girls where the models just kind of looked like normal people. They weren't
Yeah.
all underweight. Some were even a little bit, more than just the even average, all shapes and sizes. They weren't all 6 feet tall. They
Yeah.
had different shapes. And I really appreciated that. Even I remember when Dove did that and they started showing cellulite on people. I was like, thank you, because I don't know. Do the supermodels have cellulite? I can't imagine they don't have it somewhere, okay?
Right.
But even if they did, it got photoshopped out. So,
Yeah.
this totally unrealistic thing. I'm so glad that a lot of the places, even mannequins you see now sometimes are bigger. They're more normal, I would say. And
Yeah.
so, growing up, even they had the little chart where you'd go to the doctor and you'd stand on the scale, and then if you were in this weight range, you were good. Well, I was always overweight, even though, Phoenix, I wasn't overweight, but it's because I have a lot of
Mhm.
muscle mass, so I weighed more pounds. And when I would get into the range that they said was normal, I was clearly underweight. And so those charts are messed up. So there's a sense in which I'm so glad that some of that has changed, but we're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, I want to talk about the overcorrection, because I think that's what you're putting your finger on, is
Yeah.
that there's been a bit of an overcorrection in our culture. So we'll come back to that in just a moment. But I want to take a moment because I'm very excited to introduce you all to a brand new sponsor. As you know, we are very, very picky about sponsors on this podcast. We say no to a lot of people. We want to help partner with companies that are ethical, that, even in some cases are Christians and are promoting good principles. And that's why I'm so excited. I'm so thrilled and excited to introduce you to 7 Weeks Coffee. This is a coffee company that is run by Christians, and they are pro-life. In fact, that's the whole theme of the coffee. What I love about this coffee is, first of all, I'm a coffee snob. So I always have to try the product first and say, is this good? It is very, very, very good. This is really high-end gourmet coffee. It's direct trade, which is more ethical than even fair trade. I love that. I love that there's no mold. It's really high quality, small batch roasted, shade grown. And here's what I love. It's called 7 Weeks Coffee because when the baby is 7 weeks old in the womb, it's about the size of a coffee bean. But also, they give 10% of all their sales to pregnancy care centers across America. I love that. Most people drink coffee anyway. Listen, if you're going to Starbucks and you're paying $5 a day on your coffee, this is going to be cheaper than that. If you just, we spend a lot of money on coffee. If that's you, consider changing to this subscription service from 7 Weeks, because they do give 10% to pregnancy care centers across America, and it's just awesome. It's such great coffee. So I really want to encourage you to go to 7weekscoffee.com. You can use my code Alisa for a discount on your first order. Again, that's 7weekscoffee.com. Use my code Alisa. All right, so we're going to get back here to Phoenix, and let's talk about that overcorrection, because I think that's what you're putting your finger on there.
Yeah. So I understand that. We'll talk about this later, but I understand that in a sense, the fat community that I even had, I
Yeah,
hate
it's
even
like there's
using
a
that
fat
language.
community, right? That's
There's
kind of strange.
it is really weird, and I don't I am not a member of this community, however, not voluntarily in any case, though, I recognize that I am overweight. But yes, there is an active overweight community and, who I guess are sick of believing of feeling as though they've been told they're lesser than, that their voice has less impact, that they, um, are worthy of less acknowledgement, I guess, in a room, and they're pushing back on that, both inside and outside of the church, saying, "No, I have every right to be here," and rather than addressing the actual problem, I'm seeing them completely overcorrect in the sense that they're saying it's not a problem, and how dare you even say it is? And honestly, most people are buying it. They've been buying it for a long, long time.
Mm.
But it's only recently that you're getting people coming forward and calling themselves things like, um, what was it? The size
Size
dignity
dignity
activist.
activist. You sent me an article where the author was in her bio. It says, I'm a writer, a size dignity activist. That's
Yeah,
amazing that that's a category.
that's the thing. And then there was another one who said, "I am a." She literally said, "I identify as a Christian fat advocate activist."
Wow.
And I just thought, "Well, what kind of a stupid made up job is that?"
Why don't you say what you really think there,
Yeah,
Phoenix?
exactly, exactly.
I love it.
It's an correction, and
Yeah.
we've seen this in so many other aspects of our society where, yeah, there is a problem, no question. It's not as simple as some people like to make it, and some people's solution to it is either to pretend it's not there, and then you're therefore bad or wrong or evil to suggest that it is,
Mhm.
um,
It's almost
or
like it's
yeah,
become an oppressed category, like in the critical theories, how you have the
100%.
intersectionality of identity, where it's like, your ethnicity is one category, maybe your gender, all the other things, and then you get to kind of identify on the oppressed spectrum based on the intersection of those categories. And mentioning the overcorrection, it just reminds me, and I've talked about this on the podcast before because it's such a pet peeve and it just gets under my skin so much, is the overcorrection of the strong female character in movies and
Mhm.
in TV shows. It's like, yeah, we don't want women to be perceived and to view themselves as these weak, can't do anything, just waiting around for a guy to save you. Like, yeah, I get that. But then
Yeah,
there's this overcorrection where you have it, and they just portray it like it's normal. Like you're just supposed to, like you said, suspend reality and
yeah.
accept the so-called fact that virtually any woman can beat up virtually any guy.
Right,
And you
yes,
see that portrayed all the
yeah.
time, where you have
With
this
men
little
that are like
string
4
bean of a
times their
woman.
weight. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. She's like a string bean of a woman, and she can take on a whole like group of Navy SEALs. And I mean,
Yeah,
this is like, I cannot suspend reality and buy into this.
yeah, exactly. Um, so yeah, so I'm all for body positivity when it's a healthy body. So I understand that we've gone too far traditionally the wrong way and given platform and elevated women who are really unwell, and they're
Mm,
often be putting themselves in awful, situations to maintain that weight that will have long-lasting effects. I know you must have seen it and everything in the entertainment business.
oh, yeah.
So there's no question that that's there, but the other end of it isn't therefore be I mean, we're seeing women that I'm amazed they can stand, and I'm
Yeah.
not looking to be unkind. This is
Yeah.
purely objective. They're capable of standing and they're putting on bikinis and they're saying, "This is body positivity." And I think, "No, this is you rebelling
Mm,
against the narrative that you've had enough of." And I understand that attitude to a certain extent. I understand what it's like to be looked over and having that internal feeling of, "I bet it's because I'm heavy. I bet it's because 'cause I'm heavy." Why does he make eye contact with her but not me? Why, um, when he told the joke or she told the joke, was he looking to see if the thin girls laughed? But
Mm,
when I did, it was almost like, okay, shush, 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 I'm waiting to see if they laugh. Like,
mm,
I understand that, but, um, I understand that that's not where my value comes from, and I've
right.
come a long way over the years. I haven't always been the size I am now. At one point, I was underweight, and I
Mm,
was actually in the same category as you, Alisa, where for some reason, I'm a dense, heavy boned. I'm not going to say big boned, but like just a more heavy set person. And even when I was being pulled into doctors' offices because I was so underweight at the beginning of high school,
mm.
um, on the chart, I was right where I needed to
You were
be,
supposed to be,
but
yeah.
visually, I was, gaunt, like, t bones sticking out.
Right.
Um, so yeah.
And yeah, and there could be a lot going on. So I'd love for you to talk about this too, because before we went on the air, you were talking about how there can be a lot going on with this issue. And I think, like you mentioned, it can be on the underweight spectrum and the overweight spectrum. Because what we really want to get at in this podcast is a biblical view of our bodies. Because
Right.
as we know, I mean, the view of the body in Christianity is a very high view. And of
Yeah.
course, we've had Nancy Piercy on to talk about Love Thy Body, which I think was such a groundbreaking book to fight against some of the Gnosticism, I think, that people inadvertently buy into in the church. And if people are unfamiliar with that term, Gnosticism was kind of, there was a lot going on. There were different sects of Gnosticism. It was one of the earliest heresies in the church. But one of the things that many of the Gnostic sects kind of approached the body as if physical matter was evil. And so
Mhm.
therefore, that's what I think led to some Christians even denying that Jesus was fully human, because that would make him evil, because the body was viewed as evil. So I love Nancy Piercy's work, because she's saying, no, who you are is body and soul. That's what makes you
Yeah.
human together. So we can't devalue the body, and that can go on both ends of the spectrum with the underweight and then the overweight. But there's a lot going on there, and I'd love for you to talk about that, because this is the thing that I think is particularly difficult with this struggle, is that you could have a guy with a super secret pornography addiction and nobody might even know about it. Like, he's not wearing a t-shirt that says, "Hi, I do porn every day," right? But
Yeah.
yet when you have any sort of an eating issue, you're kind of wearing it out on the outside, and that
Yeah.
invites people to judge. And like, for example, I had one of my cousins. She was going through a really difficult time. She never had weight issues her whole life, but then she had to go on a particular medication that almost immediately caused her to gain 30 pounds, and there was just nothing
Mhm.
she could do about it. But she experienced some of that judgment, when really in that particular case, I mean, that's not every case, but in that case,
Yeah.
it really wasn't because she was overeating. It was just the way the medication was interacting with her body chemistry. It put weight on her. And so,
Yeah.
but then she had to deal with kind of being judged on that. So talk about
Yeah.
the different things that can be going on with this topic, even spiritually and physically.
Yeah. So, yeah, you hit the nail on the head. So, the one thing that I long for people who don't wrestle with this particular weakness or struggle in life to not oversimplify the problem. So, for example, I have heard it time and time again, always by someone who's rail thin, who clearly has not ever had to battle with this, that it's just a simple formulaic situation, calories in, calories out, what's so hard? Just maintain it and you're good. And I'm like, I understand the math.
Hmm.
This isn't a lack of knowledge or a lack of nutritional education for where I'm at and where I see other women at. There's at least 4, if not more, layers to it. So the first off is let's just be upfront. Yeah, there's a sin component to it of gluttony. Oh, and I hate that word because it's applied to every single overweight person when it need not be. But you'd never know
Well,
because you don't know
let
that
me pop in
person.
on that one from my personal experience too, because you're right. It's like we talked about the guy with the porn addiction that people don't necessarily know about. But when
Yeah.
I was in my active bulimia, I remember, because I was thinking the same thing. This isn't just a sin issue, although there is sin involved, for sure. I never denied that. But I would even
Mm,
ask, like, Lord, what is the sin? What is the sin? And the two things that came to my heart well, it's gluttony, absolutely,
mhm,
and it's
mhm.
idolatry. And that's what my sin, at least that the Lord revealed to me when I was in that phase of bulimic activity, was that it was gluttony and idolatry. But, people would look at me and not necessarily say, oh, she's a glutton, but I was.
Right, because you had the purge part figured out,
That's,
right?
yeah, yeah,
I can tell you as a teenager, I was like, I know this is dumb and I know how terrible bulimia is for a person, but my God, I would get so much less judgment if I could just handle
yeah,
if I could add
yeah,
that to my repertoire.
right.
Yeah, um so I just want to quickly read a quote that I found because I thought she summed it up really, really well. This is from a writer, Lindsay Carlson. She writes an article called Seven Ways to Love Christians Who Are Overweight. And I just really liked this quote. She says, extra pounds can become scarlet letters, marking saints as idolaters, gluttons, and sluggards.
Mm,
So just imagine what that's like to walk into a room of strangers as a heavy person, already dealing with the personal judgment you put
mm-hmm,
on yourself because you know you're not meeting a standard that you'd like, hence the body positivity movement. So you've already got that internal accusation, blame, even hate going on. But walking into a room of strangers, people who have no idea who you are, what you wrestle with personally, will judge you
mm-hmm,
before you've opened your mouth. And at that point, you're thinking to yourself, I wish I was a gambling addict, a porn
mm,
addict, a drug addict, anything that I could hide. Even though those three things just off the top of your head are going to derail your marriage, derail your career and your family, financial health. Like those things have such bigger consequences for not only you, but other people. You in that moment are thinking, I would swap this for that if I could.
mm-hmm,
But life's not that simple, right?
yeah,
So the scarlet letter thing, I thought, yeah, it's a scarlet letter F, fat. Let's just say that. Um, but the different layers to it are the sin component that everybody assumes, and certainly there is an aspect to it. For me, I recognized it as not necessarily idolatry, but um, me choosing to self medicate with something physical rather than leaning into my God
mm,
and letting
that's good.
him soothe me and comfort me, because that's what it is. When I am at times where I'm pushed to food rather than, for whatever reason, I have alcoholism in my family. It doesn't appeal to me at all. I can drink, but I don't really care to. I don't,
Mm-hmm,
but nothing. But I recognize that addictive behavior, and I have a great deal of empathy for people who do wrestle with it because I understand that chemical reaction when you eat or consume something and it lights up all those chemicals in your brain,
yeah.
and now you need all of it. It's not just a little bit like, oh, that was good, now I feel better. No, now you need all of it. Um, yeah. So where was I going with that?
Well, you're giving the different aspects of it. There's a sin component. There's like possibly an addiction component.
There's often an addiction component to it. I know for myself that I have that, genetically speaking. I have that addictive like trait.
Mm-hmm,
And although it
mm-hmm,
hasn't manifested in alcoholism, I recognize it in this part of my life.
yeah.
There's also the biological slash chemical aspect to it with the friend you just described, who not doing a single thing wrong, not overeating, not choosing to put food on a pedestal, not choosing to self medicate with food, rather in more healthy ways, but just gained weight. Um, and there's another aspect to it. I'm trying to think. There's a mental health component to it. So, yeah, we can have slow metabolisms. Yeah, we can have addictive personalities. We can also just be straight up sinners. But at the end of the day, there's also a massive mental health component to it. And people have to be set free and get therapy and counseling. I mean, for one thing, women who have had a history of sexual abuse
Mm,
often put on weight.
yeah.
Why? Because they don't want to be looked at.
Yeah. And they
I
may not even realize that. They may not even like that thought might not materialize, but that can be going on
Mhm.
underneath it. Yeah.
And I recognize that now. Praise God, I don't have that past of being sexually abused, but I do understand the discomfort of the male gaze. And I recognized years ago that that was something I was doing intentionally. I was self-sabotaging because
Mm.
I was extremely uncomfortable when I received a compliment because I was aware that they were looking at me, looking at my body, and I didn't want them to.
Yeah.
Um, and so for people who don't wrestle with this type of self-medication, we'll call it, I would just wish for them to understand that a person could be wrestling with more than one of these things. It could be sin and it could be a new medication they're taking. It could be something completely innocent. um, don't be so quick to judge because it's you're not going to know. And that's not to
Hmm.
say that this person ought to be let off the hook. And just simply taking a new pill and you gaining weight doesn't give you permission to just stay there. But it does force you to rethink, well, who's to blame?
Yeah.
And um, yeah. And the other
Well,
thing that I really want to emphasize, do we have to take a break?
no, we'll take a break after you make that point.
Okay. The other thing I really want to emphasize is the consequences of your mistakes with food don't go away when you stop abusing food. So the alcoholic, they get sober. And sure, it's going to take time for their liver to heal if it can ever fully heal, but no one would know. Whereas the weight that I carry, I didn't gain it last week. In fact,
Hmm.
I gained it the bulk of it during my 4 pregnancies.
Hmm.
Um and guess what? It's still here. So naturally, I come into a room and I'm overweight, and the thought is, well, she must be eating 2 gallons of ice cream every night. No, I don't. But I kind of did 4 years ago
Yeah. Yeah.
when I was running on
Oh,
3
I've been
hours
there. Yeah.
a day. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, yeah, the body shape, you don't know what the person is wrestling with. And now that's not to say, "Hey, I gained this 5 years ago, lay off." That's
Hmm.
plenty of time to course correct. But when someone is actively losing weight, we're no longer talking about a healthy lifestyle. They're actively having to fix past mistakes.
Hmm.
And that's something that many other addictions or sins don't have. Now, of course, that's not true for everybody. There's a whole,
Yeah.
7-step, 10-step program, and you have to go around. I mean, like, don't get me wrong. Other things have consequences, but they're not. You're not wearing them on your sleeve and being judged for those mistakes every
Yeah.
time someone lays eyes on you.
Yeah, that's good. Well, when we come back, I do want to touch on kind of the healthy balance and how the church can approach this because it seems like there's just these extremes in culture. So I'd love to
Yeah,
talk about that when we get back. But first, I want to talk to you about our second sponsor for today, and that's Good Ranchers. You all know I love Good Ranchers, and I was joking with Phoenix before before we came on. Like nothing says, let's be anti whatever's going on in culture with a big box of meat, right? It's really good, high quality, nutritious meat that I love. We love it. In fact, we had the pork chops tonight. I got a pork box a couple of months ago, and we made some pork chops tonight with fall spices. It was so good, you guys. I just love having that available so that I can cook for my family instead of just having to feel like I need to go through fast food and something that I know that is not going to be good for them. So they've got a new product for the fall. If you're like me, you love all things fall. You like the pumpkins, the boots, the sweaters, all of that stuff. And I kind of giggled when I saw this, but it actually looks pretty good. And that is their new product for the fall, which is pumpkin spice bacon. So if you subscribe, you can add that on. And current subscribers, you can also add it on to your upcoming orders. So if you want to check out Good Ranchers, this is a great time. We're heading into the holidays. You might be doing more cooking. Go to goodranchers.com and you can use my code Alisa for $30 off your first box, and you're going to get free express shipping this month. So that's goodranchers.com. Use my code Alisa for $30 off your first box and free express shipping. All right, back to Phoenix here. I'm doing my ad reads live tonight, so I don't normally do that. So thank you for hanging with me on that because I'm just trying it out, and we'll see how
and
that goes. But
I love that you're selling a big box
I
peppermint that we talk about. I
I
just love it.
But it's, you know what though? It's funny. I know because it's food and it's like now I feel extra sensitive about it. But in reality
That's the
though,
point.
it's great because they have the triple trimmed chicken breast and I can just pull that out and have something healthy to eat that's good for my
Uh-huh,
body. And I want to
uh-huh.
talk about, kind of the good response of the church because I can tell you a bad one. And this is something that happened. And I'm not just telling this story to gripe about something that happened in a church, but just to highlight that you never know who's coming through the doors of your church. And like you said, some of these things you wear on the outside, but some you carry on the inside, and people might not know that about you. But I remember when I was really, really deep in my struggle with my eating disorder. And I think by this point, I was burnt out. I'd been traveling a lot. I wasn't really going to church on Sundays anymore. I still always loved Jesus, never, left my love of Jesus, but I kind of just was not all that excited about going to a church when I had been traveling and I was burnt out and I just wanted to sleep. So a
Mhm.
friend of mine was like, please come to church with me. Please come to church with me. I really think it'll be good for you. It'll edify you. So I went to a church with a friend of mine and the pastor got up and he was very, very overweight. And he started talking
Mhm.
about people with eating disorders and he started mocking them. And he said,
Oh,
I
my.
remember he said, what did he say? He goes, oh, yeah, eating disorders. Then he mentioned like anorexia and bulimia. And he said, do you think that demon has any control over me? And he started laughing. And I remember thinking, no, but maybe a different one does, And it
Right,
really put
right.
me off. And it was very hurtful to me because I was just basically crawling into church out of obedience, trying to meet the Lord and let him meet me where I was at. And so I do want to, there is that judging component, and especially with our bodies and with food. But I
Yeah,
want to talk about because you mentioned in the last segment a lot about judging. So I want to talk about judging for a second because this is something I've talked about before. I've even written about it. The Bible does call us to judge, but not
right.
in the sense that we're talking about here. So there is a
Mhm.
time I think like to not judge somebody because you don't know their situation. You don't know what's going on in their life. But there are situations in which you do know, and we are to confront one another if there's open sin, if there's unrepented sin. But
Mhm.
in a case like this, we shouldn't necessarily like elect ourselves sin police and assume to diagnose exactly what's going on with someone just because of the way they look. In fact, that's the Bible even says God doesn't look at the appearance, he looks at the heart. And so there
Mhm.
could be so much going on. Like you said, there could be sexual abuse in the past that needs to be dealt with first. There could be all sorts of things going. There could be a woman who is in an abusive relationship, and maybe that needs attention before she can even think about eating healthier for her body. But I
Right.
would just, the Bible clearly says our bodies are the temple of the Holy Spirit. We should love and care for our bodies, which I think that is the message that really opposes this quote unquote body positivity. Because that's one of those words, too, by the way, that's kind of
Yeah.
changed in meaning, right? It's like, yeah, well, everybody wants to be body positive, right? That sounds like a
Yeah.
good thing. But really, what it ends up looking like in culture is a celebration of obesity and unhealth, which as
Big time.
Christians, we don't want to do that either. So the
Right.
Bible says, whether you eat or drink, whatever you do it all for the glory of God. So I would never want to send my daughter the message that you have to be a particular weight in order to be, you know, good in God's eyes or good in my eyes, because I do, like I said, I am so glad some of that stuff has relaxed and people can just look more like normal people, whereas they
Yeah.
would have been considered overweight in the past. But what do you think, as far as that judging component goes, what would your word to the church be? What would you say about that? And how can we avoid these extremes, but like deal in reality and walk with
Yeah.
one another with some of these things?
Yeah. So, for one, on the one end of the spectrum, I don't think churches are talking about it enough. They're
Mm.
happy to list sexual sin. Um, Thankfully, people are, the pulpit is beginning to talk more openly about the reality of porn addiction, which statistically is happening in at least 50% of the men in the congregation, at least.
Mm.
Um, so I'm glad that they're talking about these other things that people feel a tremendous amount of shame around and they're hiding. But I noticed that people are still incredibly uncomfortable about talking about the F word, and I'm not talking about the naughty one. Um, because quite frankly, you're calling out something that immediately everybody can see in the seats. Now, you can talk openly about, if you wrestle with porn addiction, and every porn addict in that room is looking around like, I don't, but for those people out, right? Like, because
Yeah.
they're not wearing a scarlet letter on their shirt. But
Yeah.
when you raise the issue, and same thing with alcoholism or drugs or infidelity, no one knows at that moment except the weight one.
Hmm.
If we raise it, and I think that's a big reason why people tiptoe around it, because it's really uncomfortable.
It's very personal too. It's like
Very
that's your
personal.
body, right? Yeah.
It's your body, and you can't go home like a haircut and go get that fixed, and you're
Yeah.
better the next day. It's gonna take time. So, but that's not to say we don't talk about it, because then we get people not dealing with it at all, and my goodness, it sounds awfully, hypocritical when the obese pastor gets up and starts talking about people who have porn addiction, and I'm like, "Buddy, like, there's an elephant in the room, literally and metaphorically, that we're not talking about.
Yeah.
Let's
Yeah.
talk about it." Yeah,
Yeah.
um,
And you noted too that there's just a massive amount of shame. And but you're
tremendous
thinking
amount of
it through
shame.
with I think with every sin struggle there's a massive amount of shame, but this is possibly one where that is magnified because of
You
the
can't
how
hide it.
obvious it is. Yeah, because you can't hide it. Yeah.
You can't hide
Yeah.
it, and it could be something that you stopped actively indulging in years ago, like I said, but you haven't gotten to a point of healing, um, where you're now repairing the damage, and
Yeah.
that's something that people just won't know. So I want the church to talk about it, but I want them to do it consistently and fairly. So I know that there are certain churches that are too focused on body image and things like that. They can't have a heavy set worship leader, and I find that very hypocritical when staffing might say, "Well, we can't have an obese worship leader," but all the half the men who are on the stage are watching porn privately,
Mm.
because statistically they are, as I
Yeah.
said.
Yeah.
So it's I don't think they're approaching it correctly.
You know what I have noticed though, in a I think maybe a more positive turn as I've traveled a lot recently, over the past couple of years to lots of different kinds of churches. I really
Mhm.
have noticed on the platform with, like you mentioned, worship leaders, there seems to be a shift there. Like they're not all
Good.
skinny anymore, and they're not all just a certain thing. They're still all pretty young. I will say
That's
the
true.
church
Yes,
could do better with that. They're
and
all
they still
still
have
under
to put their
30,
skinny
but
jeans on, dang it, whether
yeah.
they like it or not.
Yeah, yeah. And but I have noticed that there is seems to be more permission maybe to not be this like Hollywood superstar look,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know?
I'm thinking of a particularly infamous large church here in North Carolina that has a different set of standards for
Oh,
anybody that public facing.
oh.
Um, but then I would also I've had it, obviously I've had comments made to me about, honestly, not even being allowed a voice because you're fat. You're
Hmm.
fat. So who are you speaking about anything theologically and trying to give an opinion or a voice to anything?
Mm.
You're fat. And I'm kind of like, and like,
Yeah. Yeah.
uh, uh, my 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 mistakes and my struggle is just very, very transparent. Don't kid me for a second that you don't have stuff that's
Yeah.
far too ugly for people to hear about, but you get to hide it.
Yeah.
Um, so there's that, and I find I think there's a double standard also that I'm just going to throw out there. Do you
Yeah.
think that men in apologetics, for example, get criticized on their weight when they stand up and read a paper on the defense of the resurrection or some biological discovery? No, because people aren't there to judge their appearance. They're here to hear the research and hear
Mm.
the and learn.
Mm.
But I think women come under more scrutiny there because there's still an expectation of how that ought to look.
Hmm.
But yeah, but
Yeah.
then so we've got. But interestingly enough, however, and actually some of the blog articles that I shared with you and we were looking at, one woman does say, "I learned to hate my body in the church."
Mm.
And I thought, well, how interesting. And in that sense, there's a truth of taking care of your body. Your body is a temple. No question, I'm a full advocate for that. That is biblical, and we are responsible. There's no real excuse for that. The journey looks different, but that is the goal. But that scripture had been weaponized against her, I suppose.
Mm,
And because you hadn't mastered that part of what it is to exist in this body, you were
yeah.
you were you were not good on God's terms.
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah. All right, we're going to do one more ad break here, and then we'll come back, and I want to discuss this line that you sent to me in an email, which I think sums up this whole episode, and that is that fat shaming is a problem, but fat acceptance isn't the answer. So we're going to get into that when we come back here in just a moment. But I want to talk to you about our third sponsor for today, and that's Carly Jean Los Angeles. I love this company. This is a Los Angeles-based clothing company started by Carly Brannon. She's a mom of four. She's a Christian. I really love, and especially as it would relate to this episode, one of the things I really appreciate about Carly Jean Los Angeles is that their models are all different shapes and sizes. People have asked me, they say, I'm nervous to buy clothes online because I don't know if they're going to fit. And first of all, there's free returns with Carly Jean Los Angeles, but also they have, like I said, women of all shapes and sizes, heights, weights, and they try the clothes on for you. So they tell you their height, their weight, and then you can kind of tell by the shape the one that looks most like you. And I have found that that's really helped. I've never had to return anything to Carly Jean because of that. And I do appreciate that they're all the models are not, underweight, super skinny. They just look like regular people. Really, really appreciate that. I love the clothes. The jacket I'm wearing in this episode is from Carly Jean Los Angeles. I wear this almost every day right now because I just love it. So if you want to check it out, go to carlyjeanlosangeles.com. You can use my code Alisa for 20% off your first order. That's Carly Jean Los Angeles. Use my code Alisa for 20% off your first order. All right. So, Phoenix, let's kind of wrap this up now. I'll reread that line because I think that's really the crux of what we're trying to say. We really, what we
Yeah.
don't want to do, and I'm very open that I'm not perfect on my thinking on this. This is stuff I continually think through. I struggle for sure with body image. This is something that's it's definitely a thorn in my side, if I'm honest. It's
Right.
just, I've
That's
been
a
on a
great
stage
way to put
since
it.
I was 25. Well, even
Mhm.
younger. I've been on a stage since then. And then, there was some stuff I went through in the music industry that just, and I'm not blaming anyone. I certainly am not. My choices are on me, but it sort of burned or branded this idea into my mind that I have to be a certain way or certain something. And that's just been a lifelong struggle for me, I'm being honest. So I don't think perfectly about this, but I'm trying to think biblically about it. And I'm trying to approach it from a healthy perspective because the church should be the place that we can go and talk about these things and find healing and find health and resist the cultural narratives that go to these opposite extremes. So I'm going
Yeah.
to throw it back over to you, Phoenix. Fat shaming is a problem, but fat acceptance isn't the answer. Talk a little bit more
That
about that.
that's right. So, uh, as someone who wants to teach and speak publicly on theological matters, apologetics, cultural issues, I recognize that to be in a position where I am setting an example to others around me, there is an expectation that I ought to live that out in every area of my life. And I think that goes for anybody that is looking to be a solid ambassador for Christ. That
Hmm.
doesn't just stop at the spiritual level. That is a full encompassing um, role that you live out. So if someone says to me, um, you need to lose weight if you want to be a teacher, I say yes, I do, and no, I don't.
Mm.
I'm a teacher. My gifting and my knowledge and everything that God has gifted me with has nothing to do with the number on the scale. However, I am not going to but if I can set a positive example to other women, and that is not by declaring that this isn't a problem. It is a problem. If I don't resolve this, it's going to affect the longevity of my life. It's going to affect, how physical I can be with my children. It's going to impact my marriage. I'm not going to pretend that that's not the case, and I don't think other women should either. Um, but we are called to be the best ambassadors we can for Christ and to take care of the body he's given us.
Yeah.
So it just goes, honestly, I think it ought to go without saying that pursuing a healthy body size is part of the package. So do you have to hit that before you can be used by God? Of course not. And I
Right.
completely reject that idea, but I completely reject the idea that you're fine just as you are so you can stay there.
Mm.
You're fine just as you are so long as you keep moving toward where God wants you.
Yeah. And it just
Yeah.
reminds me of the verse I brought up before, whether you eat or drink or whatever you do, do it all for the glory of God. And that should be a question
Oh,
that we ask ourselves always. Like, is what I'm
yes.
eating, am I so extreme dieting that I'm not
Yes.
eating for the glory of God, or am I overeating and not eating for the glory of God? And
Yeah.
those are things that I think about too. Phoenix, anything else you want to leave our audience with as we close out today?
I just can't emphasize enough that those who want to pass judgment, you can, as you pointed out, Alisa, we are called to judge, but to judge biblically. So I think it's completely fine for you to use your eyes and take your knowledge of how the body works and how healthy eating works, and to make a judgment that that person is overweight and that that is not going to be the best form for them long term. But that's really where your judgment gets to end. When you start rationalizing, well, how did they get there? Well, they must be sinful. Well, maybe they've got some kind of abuse. Maybe they've got that. Unless you've entered into an active relationship with that person, is none of your business. Now, that doesn't mean that, once you've formed that relationship with them and there's a trust component, and they understand that you're invested in them, perhaps you can speak to that. But people are too quick to judge what's going on internally. Whereas
Yeah.
I've got eyes. I can see when a heavy person enters the room. I know what I look like. So I find it almost amusing when people like to identify, point it out online. I see Kristen Hawkins from is she Students for Life or Live Action?
I'm
She's a
not sure.
pro-life advocate. You wouldn't believe the comments that just constantly flood around her weight, and she's
Yeah.
making great points for the
Hmm.
pro-life movement. And I'm like, honestly, it's low-hanging fruit. If you can't actually address the argument, and all you've got to do is comment on is her appearance, she's already won. Like, you've
Yeah.
lost the argument.
Yeah.
Um, but I digress. So yeah, I would ask people to hold back on what they think's going on internally, and for those who do wrestle with weight, your value is not in your weight. I can't
Yeah.
express this enough, and I know books and books have been written on it, but I can't emphasize this enough. Your value does not go down and it does not go up based on the number of the scales.
Yeah.
You are inherently valuable because you are an image bearer of God. That is your identity.
That's
Your weight
awesome.
will
Yeah.
rise, your weight will fall. It does not matter. What matters is that you are stewarding your body to the best of your ability. And if you're not doing that well, you know it.
Yeah.
Go You have the tools to do something about it. Get help. If you need therapy, get therapy. If you need a support system, get it. You're not off the hook to not change. I think I messed it up.
No, that's right. I think
Okay.
that was right. That was double negative, not yeah.
Double
We know
negative.
what you meant. We know
What
what you
did
meant.
you wrong?
Yes. Well, and that's I think where gosh, shame can really there's a godly shame, right? There's a
Uh-huh.
shame is an emotion that helps us to grieve our sin. And so in a sense there is a sense in which I don't think it's healthy for people to say you should never feel shame at all. Well, no, I mean it's even the Bible
No.
talks about how they felt no shame, and that was a negative thing. So there's a sense in which shame can be used for to edify us, to convict us of our sin.
We
But
love shame. We
yes,
love shame.
yeah,
Yeah.
but the
And
shame
healthy.
that can go into the unhealthy is the kind that makes you detach from God. And I think that
Mhm.
with any issue, you mentioned, gosh, so much I want to comment now, just as we close out here, because you mentioned as far as like in church when you see this, I think it's like the sensitivity that you would apply to any sin struggle or any type of struggle somebody is going through. You wouldn't just go in like a bull in a china shop, but
Yes,
you would
thank you.
love and care for that person, hopefully. And I'm so glad, I'm so thankful that I had people in my life that weren't just like, you're a sinner, you need to do this, but they helped me to understand why I was doing this stuff in the first place. There was a
Yes.
lot tied up. There was a lot of knots, and I'm so thankful for the patience and the love of my husband to help me through that and to love me through that. So please, everyone, these any kind of sin struggle, any kind of struggle people are going through, we need to be loving and sensitive to help, especially people who want to change. That's the thing too. It is some people want to change, but you mentioned how people are online. It's a brutal time to
Oh, yeah.
be everything, like I mentioned in the beginning, is so image focused.
Yeah.
Everything is visual. And Allie Beth Stuckey actually wrote about this in her book, You're Not Enough and That's Okay, about how when I think she was pregnant with her first baby. And,
That poor
she gained
lady, every
weight.
time
And
she's pregnant.
yeah,
Yes.
every time she's pregnant,
Yeah.
people are like, why? And they comment on
Yeah.
that. And I just, man, you have to have a thick skin to do what we do. But it's people are very brave with stuff like that. But again, this is where the church should be different. The church should be a place for people to come, be ministered to, yes, receive correction and conviction, but with love and care. So,
Yes.
Phoenix, let us know where we can connect with you online, anything new you're working on, and just where people can find you.
Yeah, people can find me at Phoenix Hayes, or I think it's Phoenix_Hayes on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. I'm regularly contributing there with my weird, quirky sense of humor and
That I love.
commentary.
That I love.
Thank you. I try to keep that just on my page and keep the more theologically not
Mature.
sound. Yeah. Not sound. I don't go rogue on my own pages, but you'll also find my material on crossexamine.org. And now that I've pulled back a little bit so that I can homeschool my two older children, I have more time to dedicate to writing and recording. So I'm excited to be producing more of that over the coming months.
Very good. Well, I want to thank my guest, Phoenix Hayes, for stopping by the podcast today to talk about this sensitive topic. Again, I want to remind you to go to alisachilders.com/music to check out the new music. You can also go to youtube.com/@alisachildersmusic to listen to the songs right now. I also want to thank our final sponsor, which is Southern Evangelical Seminary. I love SES. I always love to take a class whenever I possibly can so that I keep my knowledge going. Wonderful seminary. Go to ses.edu/Alisa. You can download a free ebook and check out what SES has to offer. And in the meantime, as we pursue Christ, let's remember to keep a sharp mind, a soft heart, and a thick skin. We'll see you next time.